The hostess didn't even look up. That was the first thing. Not the words, she said. The words came later, but the way her eyes stayed fixed on the reservation screen, the way her fingers kept moving across the keyboard, as if the woman standing 3 feet in front of her was simply not worth the interruption. Celeste Beaumont waited. She had grown very good at waiting. 31 years of it, if you counted from the day she walked into her first boardroom at 22 and watched the men around the table look past her to find the person who had actually called the meeting. She had been that person. She was always that person. But she had learned early and at some cost that the waiting was part of it. The patience was the weapon. So she stood at the host stand of the Alderton, arguably the finest hotel dining room in the state of Georgia, in a gray wool coat that had seen better days, her hair pulled back simply, no jewelry except the thin gold band on her right hand that nobody ever seemed to notice, and she waited for the hostess to acknowledge her existence. The lobby behind her smelled of gardenias and old money. The chandeliers were original. The carpet was the color of burgundy wine. A pianist somewhere past the velvet partition was playing something slow and European that Celeste did not recognize, and from a corner table near the window she could already see the reason she had come. Her daughter, Imani, sitting with her back straight and her hands folded, wearing the blue dress they had picked out together at Christmas. 24 years old and trying so hard to look like she belonged. Celeste loved her so much it was almost painful to look at. "Excuse me," she said. The hostess, a young woman, early 20s, blonde, with the particular brand of polished dismissiveness that certain establishments trained into their front-of-house staff like a reflex, finally looked up. Her eyes moved from Celeste's face to her coat to her shoes and back again in under 2 seconds. It was a fast calculation. Celeste had seen it performed thousands of times and could read the result before the hostess even opened her mouth. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm joining my daughter," Celeste said. "She's already seated. Table near the east window." The hostess glanced toward the window table, then back at Celeste. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in her expression, not quite suspicion, more like the quiet bureaucratic stubbornness of someone who had decided, for reasons she would never say out loud, that the rules applied differently here. "I'll need to check," she said, and turned back to the screen. Celeste waited. "I don't see a reservation under Beaumont," Celeste said. "Or possibly under the company name, Beaumont Meridian Group." Another pause. The hostess typed something, then typed something else, then looked up again with the smile that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm sorry, the reservation appears to be for one," my daughter called ahead. She may have only listed herself. Celeste kept her voice even, mild even. "I can see her from here. She's waving." Imani was indeed waving. She had stood slightly from her chair, her expression caught between a smile and something more uncertain, the way it always got when she sensed tension that she couldn't quite locate. "I'm afraid our tables are arranged by reservation capacity," the hostess said. "If you'd like to be seated, we can add you to the reservation and find you a more appropriate table," Celeste repeated. "A table that accommodates two. Yes, there are 2 seats at my daughter's table." The hostess glanced toward the window again. "That table is reserved for—" She stopped, started again. "Our seating policy for the main dining room." "What is your name?" Celeste asked. The question landed differently than the hostess expected. Her posture shifted. "Kristen. Kristen." Celeste said it the way she said most things, quietly, without aggression, with a weight that had nothing to do with volume. "I'd like to speak with your manager." Kristen's chin went up about 1/4 of an inch. "Mr. Decker is very busy this evening." "I'm sure he is. Please let him know I'm here." There was a moment. One of those moments that stretch just long enough for both parties to understand exactly what is happening, even if only one of them has the language for it. Then Kristen picked up a small phone receiver, turned her back, and spoke into it in a voice too low to carry. Celeste turned and looked at her daughter. Imani had sat back down. She was watching now, her hands no longer folded, her face carrying that particular expression. Familiar since childhood, since the first time a teacher had looked past Imani's raised hand to call on someone else, of a person trying to decide whether to be angry or ashamed, and hating herself for considering either. Celeste gave her a small nod, a private signal, the one that meant, "I see it, I know, hold on." The manager's name was Curtis Decker. He was 50, broad-shouldered, with the ruddy confidence of a man who had spent 20 years in luxury hospitality and believed that the industry had taught him everything worth knowing about people. He came through the side door of the dining room at a measured pace, not hurrying, because hurrying would suggest urgency, and urgency would suggest that whoever was waiting had that kind of power over his schedule. He had, in the 12 seconds between Kristen's call and his arrival, already formed an opinion about what he was walking into. "Good evening," he said, stopping a careful distance from Celeste. "I'm Curtis Decker, the dining room manager. How can I help you?" "I'm trying to join my daughter for dinner," Celeste said. "She's already seated." Decker glanced toward the window. His eyes registered Imani, the blue dress, the careful posture, the champagne glass she had ordered and was not drinking from, and then moved back to Celeste with an expression that he had probably told himself was neutral. "I see," he said. "And do you have a reservation?" "My daughter has a reservation. For two. I believe there may have been a miscommunication when she booked." Decker made a small sound that wasn't quite agreement. "The difficulty is that table is in our premier window section, and we maintain those reservations quite strictly. It's a matter of—" He paused, choosing his word carefully. "Experience management. For all our guests." "Experience management," Celeste repeated. "Yes, ma'am. What I'd be happy to do is have someone show you to one of our interior tables, and your daughter could join you there. It would be a brief inconvenience." "My daughter has been seated for 20 minutes, Celeste said. "She has a confirmed reservation. You'd like to move her from a window table to an interior table because I arrived without calling ahead." Decker's expression did something complicated. "We have a number of very comfortable interior tables. Is the window section reserved for a particular type of guest, Mr. Decker?" The question hung between them like smoke. Decker looked at her, then at Imani, then back at Celeste, and in that triangulation, that brief geography of his gaze, something clarified itself that did not need to be spoken. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, and his voice had cooled by several degrees. "I'd like to sit with my daughter," Celeste said. "That's all I'm implying. Our policy. I'd like to sit with my daughter at the table she reserved." Celeste reached into her coat pocket and set her phone on the host stand face up. "I'm also recording this conversation, which I'll let you know because it's a courtesy I extend to everyone." Decker looked at the phone. Something moved through his face that wasn't quite alarm. "Not yet. That's not necessary," he said. "Probably not," Celeste agreed. "But here we are." A silence. From somewhere behind the velvet partition, the pianist shifted into a new key, still slow, still European, still unbothered by everything happening 12 feet away. "I'm going to need you to lower your voice," Decker said. "I haven't raised it, ma'am, Mr. Decker." Celeste said his name with a patience that was, by now, something very close to its opposite. "I am going to walk to my daughter's table and sit down with her. You are welcome to come speak with me further if you'd like, or not, either way." She picked up her phone, dropped it back into her coat pocket, and walked into the dining room. Imani stood when she saw her mother coming. "Mom," she said, and the word had something in it that Celeste recognized. Relief threaded through with a low, tired anger that didn't quite want to surface all the way. "Sit down, baby," Celeste said. She settled into the chair across from her daughter and looked at the menu that had already been placed at her seat. "Have you eaten anything? I didn't want to order without you. How was the drive?" "Fine, Mom." Imani stopped, looked toward the host stand where Decker was still standing watching them. "What happened?" "Nothing serious." Celeste picked up her menu. The salmon looked good. The duck looked better. "Tell me about the interview." Imani blinked. "You want to talk about?" "I want to hear about the interview," Celeste said. "I've been driving for 2 hours." "Tell me," so Imani told her. The law firm was downtown, 12 attorneys, a niche practice in environmental litigation that Imani had been circling for 2 years, sending letters, following the partners' published cases, waiting for an opening. The interview had gone well, she thought, except for one partner who had seemed to decide within the first 60 seconds that she wasn't quite what they were looking for, though he hadn't been able to articulate what that was when pushed, and Imani had pushed, politely but firmly, because she had learned that from somewhere. Celeste listened. She asked questions. She did not look back at Curtis Decker. She didn't need to. She could feel him the way you feel weather, The particular atmospheric pressure of a man who has decided he has a problem and is working out how to solve it. When the server came, a young man named Felix, according to his nameplate, who treated them with the brisk professionalism of someone who simply wanted to do his job without getting caught up in whatever was happening at the host stand. Celeste ordered the duck and a glass of the 2019 Pinot, and Imani ordered the salmon, and for a few minutes the table was just a table, and the dinner was just a dinner, and the chandelier light was warm, and outside the window the city moved past in its evening colors. Then Curtis Decker came back. He didn't come alone. The man with him was younger, mid-30s, with the lean, deliberate walk of someone who spent time thinking about authority and how to project it. He wore a dark suit and a security badge clipped to his lapel. Behind him, hanging back near the entrance to the dining room, were two uniformed officers from the Atlanta Police Department. Celeste set down her wine glass. "Mrs. Beaumont," Decker said. He said the name like he'd done some research in the last 20 minutes, like the research had surprised him somewhat, but not enough to change course. "I apologize for the interruption. This is Mr. Rollins, head of hotel security, and these officers have been called to." "Why?" Celeste asked. Decker stopped. "Why have officers been called?" she said. "There's been a disturbance in the dining room." "Where?" Celeste looked around the room with genuine curiosity. The other diners, a table of businessmen near the bar, an elderly couple by the partition, a family of 4 whose children were managing to be both loud and entirely charming, were all in various states of looking at their plates, their menus, their phones, or, increasingly, at Celeste. "I don't see a disturbance. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you. You called the police," Imani said. Her voice was very quiet and very steady. "Mom walked in to have dinner with me and you called the police." "Miss, we have a reservation," Imani said. "We are sitting at our table. We haven't raised our voices. We haven't disturbed anyone. We ordered from the menu, and you called the police." One of the officers, older, with a gray mustache, and the posture of someone who had been in rooms like this before and was already forming an opinion about where the problem actually sat, moved forward slightly. "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me what the call was about?" Decker turned toward the officer. "We had an unauthorized individual. Lied," Celeste said. "In the premier dining section, and when asked to relocate, I was asked to leave a window table," Celeste said, speaking now not to Decker but to the officer, whose name, according to his badge, was Garrett. "My daughter has a confirmed reservation for that table. I arrived late to join her. Mr. Decker asked me to move to an interior table. I declined and sat with my daughter. That is the entirety of what happened." Officer Garrett looked at Decker. "Sir," he said, "is that accurate?" Decker opened his mouth, closed it, said, "There is a seating policy." "What policy?" Garrett asked. Another silence, a different kind. Celeste reached into her coat pocket and set her phone on the table. "I have a recording of the conversation at the host stand, if that would be useful." Garrett looked at the phone, then at Decker, then at Decker's colleague, Mr. Rollins, who had gone very still in the way that men go still when they realize that the situation they walked into is not the situation they were briefed on. "Mr. Decker," Garrett said, "I'm going to need a clearer explanation of the policy that warranted this call." What happened next took about 4 minutes and felt like much longer. Decker tried 3 different explanations. The first was about capacity, that the window table was reserved for parties of 1, but Imani had her reservation confirmation on her phone, clearly listing the table for 2. The second was about dress code, that Celeste's attire didn't meet the standard for the premier section, but the dining room's posted dress code required only business casual, and 3 men at the bar were wearing open-collar shirts. The third explanation, which Decker did not quite say out loud, but which he seemed to be reaching for somewhere in the space between his actual words, was the one that needed no recording to document. Everyone in the room could hear it in what he wasn't saying. The older couple by the partition had stopped pretending to look at their menus. A woman at the businessmen's table had turned entirely in her chair. Felix, the server, had disappeared somewhere near the kitchen entrance, which was perhaps wise. Imani had gone very still in the way her mother recognized, the stillness of a person who is deciding in real time who they want to be in a difficult moment and choosing carefully. Celeste let Decker finish his third explanation. Then she looked at him with the patience of someone who has been patient for a very long time and she reached into her coat pocket for the second time that evening, and she took out her phone, and this time she made a call. It rang twice. "Jonathan," she said, "I'm at the Alderton." "Yes, I need the number for the general manager, not the evening manager, whoever is at the top of the property." A pause. "Thank you. And Jonathan, do me a favor and look up who sits on the Alderton Group's board." Another pause. A short one. "Right. Yes, I thought so. That's fine. Thank you." She hung up. She looked at Curtis Decker. "The number I just called," she said, "is my chief of staff. The Beaumont Meridian Group holds a 14% stake in Alderton Hospitality Holdings, which is the parent company of this hotel. I sit on the investment committee that oversees that stake. I've been doing so for the past 6 years." She paused. "I've eaten in this dining room 11 times. Usually in that corner booth, actually." She nodded toward a booth near the partition. "But tonight my daughter wanted the window." The room had gone very quiet. Decker's face had performed a series of expressions in the last 30 seconds that he would probably not want to revisit. "The general manager of this property," Celeste continued, "is a woman named Patricia Hollis. I've met Patricia 3 times. She's very good at her job. I imagine she is going to want to speak with you in the morning." She looked at Officer Garrett. "Is there anything else you need from me?" Garrett looked at Decker with the expression of a man who wished he had been assigned literally any other call this evening. "Sir," he said, "is there a reason these women need to remain involved in this conversation any further?" Decker said nothing. "Sir, no," Decker said. The word came out stripped of its previous confidence, a different kind of word entirely. "No there, I apologize. For the confusion." "For the confusion," Imani repeated. "Miss, my name is Imani Beaumont," Imani said. "And I don't think this was a confusion." The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room without any help. Celeste and Imani ate dinner. The duck was excellent. The salmon, Imani reported, was better than she'd expected. Felix came back and was careful and professional and didn't mention what had happened, which Celeste appreciated. The pianist shifted into something she almost recognized. Cole Porter, maybe, or someone who had studied Cole Porter very carefully, and the chandelier light stayed warm. And outside the window the city did what cities do in the evening, which is keep moving without asking permission. Halfway through dinner, Imani put down her fork. "You never lose your temper," she said. "Sometimes I do," Celeste said. "Not like that, not in those situations." Celeste considered. "Getting angry in those situations gives them a different story to tell. I prefer they have to tell the real one." Imani looked at her plate for a moment. "I was angry," she said. "I know, I'm still angry. You should be, but you weren't." Celeste set down her fork and looked at her daughter, at the blue dress, the careful posture, the face that she had known since before it was a face, since before it was anything but potential, and she said, "I was angry at the host stand. I was angry the whole time. I've been angry at some version of that situation for 30 years. She picked up her wine glass. "The trick isn't not being angry. The trick is knowing exactly what to do with it." Imani was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is it always going to be like this?" It was the kind of question that didn't have a good answer. It was the kind of question you asked anyway, because asking it was better than not asking it, because silence on the question felt like surrender. "I don't know," Celeste said. "I know it's better than it was. I know it's not good enough. I know the people who say it'll take care of itself are usually the people who don't need it to." She looked out the window at the city. "And I know that you pushed back in that conversation tonight without losing yourself. That mattered. That matters every time." Imani looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and picked up her champagne glass, the one she'd ordered and hadn't touched, and held it up. "Happy to see you, Mom," she said. Celeste lifted her wine. "Happy to be here," she said. Curtis Decker was placed on administrative leave by 7 the next morning. The call from Patricia Hollis, general manager of the Alderton, came before the breakfast service started. It was brief. It was not gentle. The hotel's parent company had already received 2 calls, one from Celeste's office, one from a board member who had happened to be dining at the bar that evening and had watched the entire episode with the particular attentiveness of someone who knows they'll need to remember the details accurately. By 9, the hotel's communications department had drafted a statement. By 11, Curtis Decker's administrative leave had become something more permanent. He had worked at the Alderton for 9 years. He was good at his job in most of the ways that his job description accounted for. The ways it didn't account for, the small calculations, the fast assessments, the seating decisions made in the space between one glance and the next, had never been written down anywhere. They didn't need to be. That was the point. Celeste did not take particular satisfaction in what happened to Curtis Decker. That surprised some people who heard the story later, though it would not have surprised anyone who understood what the last 30 years of patience actually looked like from the inside. She took satisfaction in the dinner, in the duck, in her daughter's face when the champagne glass finally came up, in the knowledge that Imani had sat in that window seat and eaten her salmon and held her ground without raising her voice, and that nobody, not the hostess, not the manager, not the two officers standing near the entrance, not the other diners with their careful not looking, had made her move. That was the seat she'd reserved. She had every right to it, and she stayed. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere you had every right to be, leave a comment below. If you've ever watched someone stay calm when the whole room expected them to break, you know what that costs. You know what it's worth. This is Velvet Reckoning. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because we're just getting started.